Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, my precious pack, and welcome back once more to VEGA Conflict. I want to talk once more about the Vector, because naturally my mind still hasn't moved on from it, and I just want to. So, the ship itself is going to be built heavily around phasing in and out, because you're going to be wanting to trigger the fracture as quickly as possible each and every time. So, to help along with that, naturally we're going to look at it from the Valraven perspective, because that's what we have now. And I'm going to look at a few of the elites that I have for stats and blah blah blah. Nice fancy stuff. So, if it follows the fitting pattern of the Valraven, which is the first ranger we have, at elite we'll have 3 defense slots, 2 armor slots, 2 special slots, 4 weapon slots, the trigger slot, as well as resistance, and then the skin slot. So, basing it off of that, we'll be able to equip the Vector with 2 specials. Can't even remember the name of them now. Let me just quickly check, because I'm not going to mess that one up. The phase charge relay, because I want to get into phase and out of phase as quickly as possible with them, so every little bit helps with them. Now, due to the increased weapon speed and stuff like that being built in, I don't see weapon specials as being all that necessary. And in the case of the Vector, in this case I'm not worried about the durability, because I'm probably just going to strap Onin to one of the ships or something like that to boost the entirety of the fleet's health. So I'll most likely farm up some of the level 3s as well, just to help it that little extra % out. And the thing is, it's individually ship-based, so the more of them you have assisting towards it, you could increase the total on a ship-to-ship basis. They're all adding to the pool, but none of them are increasing the pool size so long as you don't use Victor. So you'd be able to maintain the same pool size, increase the charge time by, based off of this, 5% per ship, so you'd get a 30% increase for those ships. Individually it's not that much, but altogether you get something. Actually, I still needed to stay in there. So what I was thinking, for the initial build that I'm going to do, I'm just going to build the typical one of building the ship and then the test weapon, which is going to be Astral Driver, which I don't see as being all that promising on it. I think I'm actually going to use the Cascade missiles more often than not, or I'm going to use a mix of the two and get a little bit of the best of both worlds with them. And the reason for that is, 1. Cascade is similar to the Nova missile, and in case no one is aware, the Nova missile, right after the Manifold, is my favorite weapon of the game. For the obvious reason of extremely good area effect control, as well as decent single target damage, as long as you can get a single of the 2 missiles to hit the target or get close enough to actually hit them with both missiles and hold them still. Whereas the Astral Driver, it's going to be better against piercing, so, well, I don't know exactly what it would be decent for, because more often than not I'll find myself against fleets that are, they're not going to be lining up the way that you would expect piercing to help, so it's not going to be too necessary. As for the defense, we are going to get the Vertex armor, and well, just equipping the Vertex armor to them is going to increase the phase screen pool, so you're going to have to boost that value to where's I going with that thought? That just started to wander off and I just lost in the bush somewhere. But as you increase the phase screen value, it'll increase the entirety of the pool's value, so you can increase it by 30% for the Vertex armor. And due to the built-in charge value of the screens being a percentage, such as this, increasing that base value won't matter too much, but what you're going to want to do is equip it with the charge values to increase that value even faster. And this is something I've been testing more and more with Trojans and stuff recently, just to see the difference. And if you only equip one Trojan with the phase charge values, it'll only increase it by that little bit for itself. And it is noticeable, but not really that much. But if you increase the charge values of every single ship in the fleet, which was one of my most recent tests, which I'll be talking about more on Friday, tomorrow basically, I was poking around now, seeing just how quickly it would charge up and get them in and out, because one thing I've been looking into is each and every ship that has the exit phase state bonuses, exactly what could you do, and more often than not I was able to get them back into phase space while the bonus was still active. So that really helped for some odd reason. And the inhibitor, I think, is one of the better ones for the phasing due to the screen defense. It literally just adds everything to it. So in the case of which tier 7 would I recommend for the hit and runs, it might actually become the inhibitor moving forwards or remain the Trojan due to the resistance on the ship itself. However, due to it being on the screen, you want the screen to be able to charge up. In this case, you want to charge quickly. It may be the go-to, especially because it's a battle cruiser. Hit and run is basically its nature. But back to the Vector. Why I wanted to do the rapid phasing for them is because of the overdrive. Now, everyone knows I hit the Infester targets regularly, and it's because I want to log in, soak up repair time from an NPC fleet in under 10 or around 15 minutes, which is what I've been doing, then log back out. In this case, the Fracture would actually be extremely good for them due to the large number of ships that are always clustered towards the end, especially with how I fight them. And if I actually mix the fleet and use something like an Armor Rock or possibly a Wraith to just run into the center of them and soak up damage at the same time it maintains its ablative, I'd be able to get them to bunch up, and you'd be able to make use of the ricochet that this has built in. And due to how they clump up, you'll be able to ricochet off of multiple of them and nail a good number of them, so you'll be ramping up the damage per second that it does drastically just because of that one random burst. And due to the relatively sluggish nature of the ships, it'll work out in the favor of the ship itself, just adding additional firepower. And if you strip the ablative off of them, well, you're going to be doing 125% damage directly to their hull itself. Unlike if you were doing direct damage to them through the ablative layer, it would only be about 12.5%. Okay, what else was it that I wanted to talk about before I went on to the next thing that I wanted to discuss? Wasn't the phase state bonuses, because they didn't strike me as odd. They're essentially the same as every other Pharmakon now. Weapon mass, it was different than the Valraven because it doesn't have any other specific counter bonus aside from the ablative suppression, but that isn't a whole bunch. It's about 15% between the two. It wasn't the movement speed, there was something else. Probably remember it and bring it up in tomorrow's video when I actually talk about phasing and these little tests I've been running. But for now, let's go ahead and let's just put it into the theory that I was going to suggest. So against the Infester targets, what I was thinking of doing, as I said, was sending something ahead to get the fleet to bunch up. That does not necessarily have to be a ship with a long repair time, such as a Wraith or something that I brought up as the example. You could potentially use a tier 1 cruiser and use it by moving sideways, and use Onin's health bonus to allow it to take at least 2 hits before it has to be destroyed. That means you could get the vectors bunched up and you could start using the overdrive to hit the targets repetitively and just bleed them. The other thing that I was thinking of doing is just using 6 vectors period and just doing the rapid phasing and seeing how it plays out in their favor. For now, I think that it won't really work out with phasing as it is now, because the out-of-phase defense of only 85% means they're taking more damage, so my tactic of just soaking up repair time is just... it'll work out for them, so I might actually build a few of them for a laugh. But in all actuality, I will eventually farm with them because they may become the go-to ship due to their stats. It doesn't look like anything special when they're out of phase, but when they exit phase, you have this little bonus, and due to the tests I've been running with the other stuff, phasing 2.0 does suck pretty bad. But if you get the correct values and just strap nothing but just increased phase charge and stuff like that to them, it isn't half bad. And if I'm not mistaken, the level 3 special actually does up to 3% per one, so you'd be able to get upwards of 6% per ship, a 36% bonus to the charge time, and a half that to the drain. Well, No, it's about 2% for the drain. So about 12. 4%, yeah, about 24% for the drain value, so you'd be able to get in and out of phase a little bit more quickly while you're in the fight. So you'd be able to make a better use of the values. And due to the increased charge time, theoretically, you'd be able to enter phase again even under fire. However, again, I'd have to test it. Right now it's only being used on some of the Trojans that I have. And even then, that's a stretch of the imagination, because I refitted some of the... Yeah, they're the ones I was slowly refitting, because they were the ones I'm currently refitting them. Every now and then I stripped them down completely, but I was refitting them each with one. I was checking to see what the different values would be, and this is one of the last ones I was testing. But again, I'll talk about that more tomorrow, because by then I'll have refitted them all, I'll be testing them again. But I'm done chatting your ears off, let's get to the next part of the video. Alright, the next thing I wanted to discuss really quickly was it actually relates to the Infester targets, and it ties into the vector and what I mean. And in this case, I'm going to show you what I mean, what I want to do with a single throwaway ship, in the case that I did want to go down that route. So the objective would be to get the entire fleet to bunch up so that the vectors would be able to then ricochet their plasma rounds around the targets and just decimate them, because for every single shot you fire in the hits, as long as they're clustered up, you're going to hit more. And if each round can ricochet 3 times, the first impact reduces it by 1, so you bounce off to two additional ships. You could theoretically hit and do 3 times the damage of the value per ship. So if you're dealing with a cluster target like this, and you get them bunched up like this, so in this case I could actually use 2 vectors as support for this dreadnought, as it is currently at Mark II, and they'd be able to chain into that large cluster in front of the dreadnought, and they'd just be able to decimate it because of the damage. And for single targets, well, they would still have that stupidly broken plasma round, but on top of that, they would still have the basic weaponry. The issue still is with the phasing, as well as how the AI behaves in the game. With multiple aggressive ships, one thing I've noticed is with every ship that has weapons, you're going to have one issue where ships will randomly retarget to fire on the ships with weapons, such as, in this case, my Pegasi, they have no weapons. So they have no issues of being attacked. Because that's one of the things I've picked up over the time of playing the game, how the AI behaves. It's also how, whenever I say you guys should manipulate it, it's things like these, such as which way you want the ships to move. And yes, you can influence the way that the ships will move. I'll talk about that in another video, just like everything else I say. But the objective for what I want to do with the vectors is to be able to take them into the targets and reliably destroy them. Now, the repair time is going to depend on how many times they get hit out of phase, because once they're in phase, and the objective is to get them into phase as quickly as possible, they'll naturally go out of phase a little bit more quickly due to how I'm going to be building up the first test fittings. But theoretically, they should be able to get in and out quickly enough to make full use of their phasing. And I'll talk about that more when that video comes out. But for now, be safe out there, my pack. Happy hunting, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!